My name is Robert Borosage. I am the president of the Institute for America's Future. And on behalf of the Campaign for America's Future and the American Prospect magazine, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this conference on conservative failure. Why focus on the failure of conservatives? Well, ideas, as Irving Kristol, the godfather of the neocons, taught us, have consequences. And after 6 years of conservative misrule, Americans have been, in another Kristol phrase, mugged by reality. There has to be a reckoning. And there is no way really to put the country back on the right track unless we are clear about what took us off the rails. Now here is a decent summary of the basic conservative mantra, poll-tested, focus group, message massaged for popular consumption. It is the set of things that they have sold us. I would argue that conservatives and conservative ideas have dominated our politics over the last quarter century or so. But certainly in the last 6 years, with Bush in the White House, with DeLay ramrodding the Congress, and with Karl Rove pursuing a political strategy that focused on mobilizing their own base, conservatives largely had their own way. They did what they wanted to do. And Bush took what might be called the movement conservative version of these ideas and implemented them with catastrophic effect. Each of the signature Bush follies and failures, Iraq, Katrina, Enron, the Gilded Age inequality, the failed effort to privatize Social Security, Shivo and stem cell, and much more, can and should be traced back directly to conservative ideas and to the conservative ideologues and think tanks that championed them. What are the causes of the failure? Now, in our debate, there's a lot of attention to cronyism and to incompetence and to corruption. Gingrich calls it the 4 C's and adds consultants as the reason for the Republican demise. I would suggest, however, if I can get out of this, that it's not just incompetence, it's not just corruption, it is actually the original conservative conception. In fact, in many ways, corruption and incompetence aren't idiosyncratic to conservatives. They are, in some ways, an integral expression of the scorn they have for government. And in fact, they often serve their purposes by helping to discredit the government that they seek to discredit. Later today, E.J. Graff will take a good look at Katrina. But with apologies to her, let me steal from her work and use it as an example of what I'm talking about. Conservatives scorn government. Ronald Reagan taught them that it is not the solution, it is the problem. Here's Grover Norquist, the conservative activist, vowing to cut it in half and drown it in the bathtub. Now that sounds extreme, but of course Grover has every Republican signed on to his no taxes pledge, which if you extend that for any length of time will in fact end up inevitably cutting the domestic side of the government in half or more. This scorn has consequences. Before Bush got to office, Heritage and other conservative groups were dismissing FEMA as a bloated entitlement program. People who live in areas of risk, they said, should self-insure. You're on your own. So when Bush got to office, he cut the budget of FEMA, he kicked it out of the cabinet, he stocked it with cronies, and he watched as the pros left in disgust. And so when Katrina hit, FEMA didn't show up. And New Orleans residents found they were literally on their own. Only in the end, it wasn't government that ended up drowning. Now, we're in a different period. The vast majority of Americans are looking for a new direction. In 2006, they turned Republicans out of office in large numbers, up and down the ticket, from the most local election all the way to both houses of Congress. But this ideas realm is still very contested. This is contested terrain. Conservatives are now scrambling to escape responsibility for the Bush debacle. Tonight, in their first debate at the Ronald Reagan Library, Republican presidential candidates should be challenged, not simply on how they would better manage the government, but what they would change in terms of the basic policies and ideas that guide them for the future. Now, I suspect that as a way of sort of gingerly separating themselves from Bush, you're going to see a lot of this tonight. A return to the faith, a call to go back to Ronald Reagan's brand of conservatism. Reagan, in part because of a tireless right-wing campaign, gets a pretty good press these days. He was smart enough to keep us out of a losing war. He spurned his own neoconservative advisors and negotiated with Gorbachev and helped to start the process of bringing the Cold War to an end. But we should remember what Reagan championed: military unilateralism and scorn for international law and allies, top-end tax cuts, corporate trade deals, rollback of environmental workplace, consumer and small investor protections, assault on labor, scorn for government, privatization of Social Security, dismantling of Medicare. The same conservative mantra, which really Reagan helped perfect, implemented with the same calamitous effect. Gilded Age inequality, the savings and loan scandals, Iran-Contra, the assault on Social Security, the rollback of basic regulation and protections. Ketchup, as you remember, is a vegetable for children's lunch. In many ways, Bush's problem wasn't that he was divorced from Reagan, it was that he was more Reagan than Reagan himself. Without a Democratic Congress to limit his excesses, he was able to implement more of what Reagan espoused. So this conference will probe the roots of Bush's failures in the conservative ideas that he embraced. And let me paraphrase by quoting or distorting, if you will, the old Gipper himself, Ronald Reagan himself. I would suggest to you as a people, as we face this new century and the staggering challenges that we have as a country and the opportunities we have, that we have to learn one basic lesson, and that is the fact that conservatism is not the solution to our problem. Conservatism is the problem.